you very much for joining me in this session. I hope you're going to all help me creating an application, and we're going to create that application from scratch. And my idea is to actually go as far as publish this application to Marketplace and hopefully, get it verified by tonight or something. Then starting tomorrow, I can become rich and famous. Thanks to you all because you're going to help me creating that application. My name is Maarten Struijs. I'm a Windows Phone evangelist for a company called Alten PTS in the Netherlands. So sorry for my funny accent. And it's going to get worse. The more I'm getting excited, the faster I'm going to speak and the more my accent will appear. So hopefully you can follow me, throughout the whole presentation. I'm going to show you a lot of code, but here's first an important announcement. So during this session, you all have a chance to win a Windows Phone. I'm going to ask a question, depending on my mood, depending how our application is going to be turning out, it's going to be a hard or an easy question. So it's really depending on my mood. I don't have a clue what the question is going to be. Hopefully I know the answer, but I'm going to decide who wins that phone at least. So the takeaways for this session are we're going to talk about designing Windows Phone applications. We're going to talk about developing Windows Phone applications and what the difference is between those two. And there's sort of a narrow, kind of area where you might, design applications and develop applications yourself, especially if you are a one-person shop or something. And then it's very good to know something about Expression Blend as well. We're going to talk about testing Windows Phone applications. What are some of the new features in device emulators? So I'm going to show you a little bit of Mango, which kind of sounds like a song. That's kind of fun. A little bit of Mango. So I'm definitely going to show that to you. And we're going to talk about submitting a Windows Phone application to Marketplace, what you need to do for that as well. And then hopefully we still have time for some questions and answers, at least one answer from you and one question from me. If we are running out of time, then I'm definitely going to be available at the booth to discuss Windows Phone development more. What is in the description right now, and hopefully nobody of you came just alone for hearing me talk about unit testing for Windows Phone applications, because that's the part I have not working right now because I'm using a new drop of the tools and I didn't get that right. So rather I'm going to show you some other things instead of, a crashing application continuously while I'm testing it. So I'm going to submit an untested application, which adds to the excitement, I guess. Now, one of the most important takeaways of this session is hey, our tools are free and you can get them from create.msdn.com. So there's nothing you need to remember except for that URL, create.msdn.com. Go there, you have one single download, and if you already have Visual Studio, for instance, installed on your machine, what you get is new project templates to target Windows Phone applications. If you don't have Visual Studio installed, you get an express version of Visual Studio that you can use to actually develop applications for Windows Phone. Together with that download, you also get Expression Blend, the tool to design wonderful user interfaces for Silverlight-based applications, thus also for Windows Phone applications. And that same location, create.msdn.com, you can also use that to submit your applications once you have developed them and once you're ready to make some money. So it's really your one-stop shop, and it's just very, very important to, remember create.msdn.com. Now, one of the things, and this is kind of a level 300 session, but I want to have some introductory words here as well. So we're going to talk about application development from scratch, and I think it's kind of important to realize that all applications that we develop as developers for this platform, we are always developing managed applications. So your applications can be written in C# or Visual Basic.NET, but there's no such a thing as a native application that's written in C++, for instance, that you can run on the phone. So it's got to be a managed application. And at first, when I, last year when I started developing for Windows Phone, I thought that's sort of a limitation for me. It's I came from a background, developing Windows mobile applications using a lot of managed code actually, but also always with that feature to be able to p-invoke back into native code and do some cool stuff on the bare metal there. Well, that's not possible on a Windows Phone. And at first I thought that's a limitation, but I have to admit now after a year of developing applications for Windows Phone and teaching other people how to develop applications, I must say that I don't really miss, like that escape towards C++. It's really cool that everything is actually managed code. Now, those applications that you develop can be Silverlight based, and a Silverlight based application is basically an event-driven application. So you have a UI, that UI has a number of UI elements or controls, and once the user does something with a control, an event will be fired, and on that firing of an event, we will execute some code. So 99% of time, probably, that application is in rest and is not draining batteries. There's another model for Windows Phone applications, which is making use of the XNA framework. Those applications written using XNA are still managed applications written in C# or Visual Basic.NET, but the architecture of those applications is different, because instead of waiting for some event to happen and executing some code, what's happening in an XNA framework-based application is that 60 times per second you will a function inside your application will be called, actually two different functions, one to update your user interface and another function to read whatever user input there is. And that's going to happen continuously 60 times per second, meaning that even if nothing is happening inside a XNA-based application, you're still draining battery because we're still executing, because we still need to know whether or not, for instance, a gaming situation needs to be updated. So the mindset for developing XNA framework-based applications and for Silverlight-based applications is a little bit different. And that's something you just have to keep in mind. Now, what's really cool is that, XNA is great in developing applications that make use of 3D graphics with different possibilities to light sources from different angles, so you get a real depth idea inside your application. And Silverlight-based applications are great if you have a UI in which, you have a couple of buttons, maybe some text boxes, you have to enter some text and stuff like that. If you want to do that kind of work inside an XNA framework application, that's kind of very hard because you have to draw your own buttons. You're responsible for creating your own user controls because you cannot, out of the box, use Silverlight combined with the XNA framework today. But in Mango, that's going to be possible. So inside a Silverlight application, I can make use of XNA framework functionality, and inside an XNA framework application, I can make use of Silverlight functionality. And for instance, if you're developing a game and that game has an about page or something, it's great that you can use Silverlight now to create that about page, so you don't have to create your own UI controls. Very, very cool stuff. Now, it is important to use the right tool at the right time. And once you start developing a new application, and we're going to talk about Silverlight-based applications today, typically what you want to do is start with Expression Blend and create a user interface. You probably have, your requirements already sorted out, so you know what kind of an application you're going to make. Well, then it's kind of important to, have the look and feel of that application right. The original idea, also with the Windows Presentation Foundation to be kept in mind if you're developing applications for desktops, for instance, is that there's a separation between designers and developers. A developer typically doesn't know anything about great user interfaces, and I'm the living proof of that because that application that we're going to design is probably not the best one as far as the UI is concerned. But I'm still going to try and use Expression Blend to create my user interface. I have found out that, Expression Blend for me as a developer was not the easiest tool in the world to actually start using, but just investing a couple of hours or maybe a week or so of your time, it's going to gain you back a lot because you're going to get way more productive if you know your way around, at least a little bit in Expression Blend. Visual Studio 2010 is the tool that you use to actually develop your applications. You write code in Visual Studio 2010. You have the whole IntelliSense stuff. And what's really cool, in my opinion, is that with Windows Phone, we have, always we're using the latest version of Visual Studio. So it's just a brand new, well, last year it was a brand new release, but we are first-class citizens, which is very, very important in my opinion. You can debug your applications inside Visual Studio, and that's something you're probably going to say hey, big deal, you can debug your applications. Well, actually it is a big deal if you think about it. If you're developing a desktop application, your development machine and your target machine are exactly identical. kind of easy also for debugging purposes. But if you're developing a phone application, your target machine is going to be a phone or an emulator, but in fact the emulator is a phone as well, and your development machine is your desktop machine or your laptop machine. So debugging is something in which remoting is involved. I'm like debugging some code that is running on an entirely different box. So it is a big deal. Think about that each and every time if you are debugging a Windows Phone application. And probably, like for the team who created Visual Studio, I would say a small applause each and every time that you hit that breakpoint, because it's actually fantastic what they do. After we've written an application, it's also kind of important to test that application. Now, we're not going to use unit testing, as I said, but it's still, at least I want to see that that application is running properly. And I didn't bring a phone with me, but thank goodness there is a device emulator, so we're going to run everything on device emulator today. Now, in real life, of course, you need to test at least, a little bit on the device as well, because with device emulator, I can perfectly test my code, but the UI experience, it's kind of harder to test, it's different if I'm running on a large box or, with a small screen with touch input, for instance. So I need to definitely test on a device as well. But device emulator is a remarkably good tool that you can test lots of functionality with. So, we're going to design a Windows Phone application, and we're going to start using Expression Blend to create maybe a prototype first, and then definitely the user interface for our Silverlight-based Windows Phone application. Now, new in Mango is that you get an additional tool if you download all those tools once they are released later this month, in beta, I have to say, of course. But you will get eventually something called Sketchflow as well. And Sketchflow is, part of the Expression Blend family. It's a tool with which you can quickly draw, your initial mock-up of a user interface. And if you're working for a larger organization, you can use those draws, which contain still fully functional XAML code. You can use those as discussion items to get, the best efficient user interface for your Windows Phone application. With Mango, we're going to have full Silverlight 4 support for Windows Phone developers. So the applications we're running are complete Silverlight 4 applications, which means that we will get more UI controls available for our Windows Phone applications. If you look right now, today, we are having, something like a Silverlight 3-point-something version, but it's going to be Silverlight 4 in future. It also means that it's going to be easier to have a design pattern like MVVM incorporated in your Windows Phone application. Right now, there is, there's a great product being MVVM Lite, but it's kind of, quite a few things need to happen under the cover to get, for instance, a command event handler down to your code that's going to execute in another layer of your application. That's going to be easier in the Mango time frame as well. Expression Blend can also be used to design, to show sample data, to create sample data. So without even having my real life data available, I can really, if I'm creating lists or something, get a feeling of how that list is going to appear on a phone. And hey, there's no code required if you're going to use Expression Blend. Pretty cool for me, for instance. Even though I'm a developer, it's kind of scary if I start coding, as you will see later on. So let's just go ahead and do a little demo on designing a Windows Phone application. I'm going to go to my development machine here. And the first thing I'm going to do is start Expression Blend. And we're just going to start from scratch for this first demo. What I'm going to do is create a new project. And that project is going to be a Windows Phone application. And I'm just going to target today's Windows Phone devices. And I'm going to use Visual C# for any code behind it I'm going to use. So what's going to happen is that I'm going to get a design area for my application. And the first thing I want to do here is, well, probably I want to show a list to all of us. What you need to note right now is the following. Let me enlarge that a little bit. Today we have, 14 different UI controls available. We have a number of behaviors, and behaviors are things inside Expression Blend. It's XAML functionality that can give, some sort of a behavior, some interactivity to your application. Like, for instance, I can change from state to state by just dragging and dropping a go to state action on a UI element. You also note that we have two shapes. Those two shapes are an ellipse and a rectangle. And so that's just something just to keep in mind right now. And what I'm going to do now is actually create some sample data. For that, I'm going to this data tab here. And what I'm going to do is create sample data, just some new sample data. I'm going to create a new sample source for that. And what happened already is that Expression Blend created a collection for me with two different properties. The first property is a string. Well, I don't like that. I want to change that into an image. And I'm just going to take some images from my machine here. So let me see, probably this sample pictures. And that second property right now is a Boolean, but I want to have a string there instead. And I can, like specify how large that string is going to be, how many words are part of that string, all that good stuff. Now I'm just going to drag and drop this collection to my phone surface. And here you see the list. And if we would have had more time, I'm just going to auto-size that, like to fill up the entire content area of my screen on the phone. If we would have more time, I would have also, like shown you how you can change all these individual items to make them appear a little bit nicer even. But let's just move now. Let's assume this was a very successful application that we created. And hey, like somewhere this year, Mango will be released, and we want to, like stay up to date for our users of this application. So I want to transform this to a Mango application. Well, using Expression Blend, I can do that already. So what I can do is I'm just going to go here to my project view. I'm going to take this project, and I'm going to update it to Mango. It just asks me if I want to save my current work right now because I didn't save that before. And now it still looks exactly the same, but now it's a Mango application. And actually the only difference is that in my manifest, it now indicates like, hey, I'm now targeting Mango instead of Windows Phone. The other thing, however, is that by doing that and by later on recompiling, what I will gain is better performance just by running on Mango, because some things under the cover have been changed, like the whole way the garbage collector is working, for instance. So applications will run faster on, like the next version of Windows Phone. But it's still looking the same. And hey, we should have, like more and cooler features right now. So let's take a look if that's going to be true. So I'm going to go back to controls. Instead of 14, I now have 17 different controls. If I take a look at those, what I see, for instance, is that we have a path list box, which is a list box, but, like a special type of a list box. We have 13 behaviors instead of 9 behaviors. And one of the important new behaviors that we're having actually is this invoke command action, which implements an interface iCommand and which is used in an MVVM type of application to hook up event handlers to code that is executing in another layer of your model there. And I have 18 shapes instead of 2 shapes. So richer functionality to actually create our application. So let me just go ahead and make this a little bit different then, since we have that possibility anyway. So I'm going to delete this list box here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these shapes. And the shape I'm going to take is an ellipse. I'm going to put that ellipse here. I'm going to probably resize it a little bit. Just make it a little larger, like this, for instance. And what I want to do is not just have a, like a white ellipse on my screen there. So I'm just going to make this transparent. And the next thing I'm going to do is right-clicking inside that ellipse, and I'm going to create a path. I'm going to convert that UI control into something called a path. And we already saw that we have a path list control. And the idea of a path list control is that we don't have, that list control doesn't need to show information just in a vertical order, but can follow a different path. For instance, my items can be projected on that ellipse there that I just converted into a path. So that's what I want to do for the new version of our application. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to continue by going to my controls here and taking this path list box. I just added it there. It doesn't show anything right now because, first of all, I'm not using sample data so far in this new control. And secondly, the list box doesn't know which path it has to follow. So if I'm going to go to my properties on my list box, what you will see is that I can specify a layout path for this particular control. I'm just going to click this object picker here. And now I'm going to use my mouse simply to click anywhere in that ellipse I created and convert it into a path. So now my list box control knows that it's going to follow a path being an ellipse. And the next thing I'm going to do is take my sample data that I still have from our first version of our application. I'm just going to drop my sample data on that list here. I hope I'm doing that. Let's do that. Let's take the connection. And you see that this list box appears completely different right now. Maybe I should have enlarged that ellipse a little bit to get more items on there. And hey, this stuff is fully functional. So what I can do is run this project from inside Blend. I'm going to deploy to the emulator. And we're just going to, install the application on that device emulator. And once that's done, I can fully test out this application. I didn't write any single line of code for that. And here's my control. I can select items. So pretty cool stuff already. Now, one other thing, and even for this little thing, I think it's worth to have Expression Blend. One of the things you need to do in order to make sure that your application will meet the requirements once you submit it to Marketplace is you have to test on dark backgrounds and on light backgrounds. And one of the things we always used to say, and I'm guilty there definitely, is like, hey, maybe it's an idea to switch your emulator to a light background and also deploy your application, not just to the emulator, but also to a real device and use that device with a dark background. Well, if you're using Expression Blend, none of that is necessary because by just switching this button here, I can change from a dark to a light background and I can immediately see how my UI is going to look like on a different background. No need to deploy applications. And I can switch back and forth, also, do some, experiments with the theme color and stuff like that, all from inside Expression Blend. Now, the other thing, because we are going to develop a real application, so let's do that now. And I already created a little bit here, but inside Visual Studio, it's going to be an application called Where Am I? Sounds like a killer application, right? Sounds like something you guys would want to download from Marketplace once we have published it, because we created it together, right? So let's do that. Now what I want to do is create a little bit of a better user interface for this. So from my project menu, I'm just going to open this same project inside Expression Blend again. So Blend is started again, but now I'm not going to create a new project, but instead I'm just going to use this existing user interface. And I don't know how about you all, I like the work Microsoft has done with Metro as a design language. I do like, the sizes of buttons, the fact that there's not too much Chrome, but just functionality. But on the other hand, sometimes I think that everything is a little too squared. I like a little bit more circles there, a little bit of round shapes. For instance, for buttons. Well, I can do that very, very easy actually, by just selecting my button and edit a copy of the template for a button. So I'm going to create a new style here, and on that new style, what I'm going to do is simply change something on the button background. I'm going to modify that corner radius here, maybe add 30 there, and what you will see right now is that, hey, that button, it's still a fully functional button. Still, if you select it, it will, reverse and stuff like that, but it shows a little bit friendlier for my application. The other thing, if you've developed Windows Phone applications, is that it's always kind of hard to, add an application bar from inside Visual Studio and get a look and feel how that application bar with, icons and menu entries, how that's going to look like. And especially selecting icons is kind of a challenge also. You need to know where your icons are stored and stuff like that. Well, again, in Blend, that's going to be kind of easier. Because what I can do from inside Blend is create a new application bar. It already created it here, just below my surface that I can use there. And now I'm just going to add a couple of buttons there. And I have a full designer experience here, so I'm going to create a new application bar icon button. And what I want to create is just something with an icon, and this points to a number of default installed icons already. So I'm going to use a back one, which I'm going to call zoom out. And I'm going to add another item. And let me just see if there's another nice icon that I can use. Well, maybe this sync item, but I'm going to call this where am I. I'm going to click OK, and here is my application bar fully functional. Now the only thing it's kind of hard to see on the screen is that the background of this application bar is not the same background as the rest of my application. I kind of don't like that. So what I'm going to do is change the background color of my application bar, and I'm just going to use a system resource. I'm going to make it a semi-transparent color, and now it just fits in beautifully with the rest of my application. Now the next thing I want to do is have some more functionality here. Maybe a little bit of like some more user interface stuff here. So I'm going to, like add another control. And the thing I'm going to add is something called a location. And that location, let's see, starting there. What I want to add is a Bing Maps map control. So I'm going to drag and drop that here. And it's already positioned in a first row inside a grid control. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to enlarge that map a little bit. So I'm going to auto size it to fill. And this is immediately live data here. And I can set some properties on that map. For instance, what I want to do is maybe have a scale control visible on it. So we have that too. So this is going to be my user interface. I'm pretty happy with it so far. And let's just, let's see how this runs inside, inside the emulator. So I'm going to run my project from inside Expression Blend again. Here's the emulator. Let's take a look what's going to happen. We are deploying again. And okay, looks reasonably well. It's not entirely good because I kind of lost my button, so I need to fix that part there. So let me just terminate this application. And let's see what's going on here. This auto size is kind of cool, but I should have been, like part of that content panel here, which hopefully I will get to. There we go. This is way better. Now I need to resize it again. There we go. Now my button is visible as well. So I can even, do some simple debug actions inside Expression Blend as long as I'm designing a user interface. Now the other thing that happened so far is that we are still, in need now to add some code to this application because it's still not doing anything. So let me go quickly back to the slides, and then after that continue with a little bit of Visual Studio. So if you're developing a Windows Phone application, so far we designed the application. If you're developing, so if you add functionality to that application, you're going to make use of Visual Studio 2010, which in the new version that will be released later this month in beta form, will have support for both Windows Phone 7 applications and Mango applications. And using Visual Studio, you can create Silverlight applications, ActionA framework applications, or a combination of the two. And what you're doing typically is just adding functionality to that user interface that we already created. And you can develop in C# or VisualBasic.net. What's going to be new for the tools that will be available later this month is that Visual Basic support will be immediately out of the box. So you don't have to separately install Visual Basic support as you have to do today. What you also will have is profiling capabilities. So we have a full code profiler in the Mango tools, which will help you tremendously to actually get better performing applications. And what's kind of cool if you're using Visual Studio, well, you already saw that when I was designing a UI for my application. Hey, if you're using Visual Studio, you don't need design skills because you're thinking code. I love thinking code, so that's what we're going to do here. And important, if you're still targeting Windows mobile applications, for instance, is that you can run Visual Studio 2010 side by side with Visual Studio 2008, which is kind of important there, like if you need to target those devices still. So let's continue with our application and let's start developing some code for that application. So let me switch back here. And what we're going to do is we're going back to Visual Studio. And Visual Studio noticed that, hey, we have changed something in our project. So with Blend, we added some functionality to our project. And what I need to do is reload my project. And what you will see is that actually there's going to be an additional folder added inside my project menu there in Solution Explorer. So I'm going to reload. And you see a new folder icons appearing there. Well, that is that location where those two icons I'm, like added to the application bar are stored. Now, if I open my main page, what you see is that, hey, I have that same UI. The only thing that's different from a look and feel point of view is that, well, this here doesn't look that great. I mean, that application bar still looks a little bit, well, it's there, but I don't really see whatever I created earlier. So that's where Blend definitely is better. Let me quickly check if my map control it's outside my grid. And the reason for that's very important as well. If you make modifications inside Expression Blend, and if you're not building your project, now Visual Studio doesn't have a clue that I modified this last minute. So what I need to do is make sure that I'm going to save all files here. And now if I go back to Visual Studio again, it again sees that, hey, something changed again from Expression Blend. So I'm going to reload at least those changed files, and now you see that my UI is updated and that button is actually visible. So what we're going to do is add some code. And let's just start by, like adding some code here for this button. And instead of typing that code, but, like in order to save some time, I'm going to make use of some code snippets, but I'm going to talk you through them. So what I want to do is change the appearance of my map each and every time I'm actually, like clicking that button. What I can see is that, hey, my map immediately gives me an error, so something is wrong with that control there. Well, let's take a look why that's happening. Well, if I take a look at this map here, then what I see is that it doesn't have a name. So let me just make sure that I'm going to add a name here. I'm going to call it my map. So of course I still can, like immediately change information in XAML as well. Now hopefully that solved my problem here. Let me just quickly see if that's true by rebuilding. And at least now what we can see is that, hey, yes, indeed, my map is now known. The other thing I want to do is initialize some data while I'm constructing this class. So I'm going to add some code to my constructor here. And what I want to do is making sure that on that map that I can display information in aerial mode, so have satellite images, but also a road map, just a regular, like a Bing map. And initially I'm setting my map to road. I'm also doing something weird here. I'm going to make use of the accelerometer. So I want to make use of some sensor inside the phone. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change something on a projection, being the rotation there. If I'm taking a look in my XAML, what you noticed earlier is that I already created that button. Well, if I'm going to show that button to you, what you will see is that the button contains a projection. That projection has the name PROJ, and with that, I'm going to do something in combination with the accelerometer. So that's the idea here. I'm going to continue because there's something else we still need to do because we created this application bar. So let's go to that application bar here in XAML. And let me add some event handlers here as well. So I have an event handler for this zoom out. It's going to be a click event handler. And I'm going to do something similar here for my where am I part, adding a click event handler as well. And let's go back to code to add some functionality in order to do something when the user clicks that particular control. So what I want to do here is figuring out where I am. And in order to figure out where I am, a Windows Phone has location awareness. So inside Windows Phone, you can easily get latitude, longitude information, and a whole bunch of other information. So what I'm going to do is each time I'm clicking this where mi application bar item. I'm going to figure out what location I'm having. What you can see is that I'm subscribing to an event being a position changed event. I'm just using a little lambda expression here to center my map to my location. Then the next thing I'm going to do is zoom in on that map. And finally, if I'm clicking the zoom out button, well, in that situation, what I want to do is take my map and set its zoom level back to the original value being 1. So I think we are ready to, compile this application. So let me just make sure that it's gonna compile. There we go. We have 0 errors, 0 warnings. So this would be, like a great time to ship this application, bring it to marketplace, and get rich, right? I mean, why bother anymore? But of course, I told you that we have a device emulator, and I didn't bring a device with me, unfortunately. Otherwise, I could have shown this application running on a device as well. But maybe we should spend a few words on testing the application. But just a few words then. So what I want to show is how Device Emulator can help you test this application. And if you remember about the application, it's kind of a weird application, but at the same time, it's going to make use of sensors on the device. It's also going to make use of location on the device. Especially location is something that's very, very hard to test, no matter if you're having a device or no device. In the Windows Phone time frame, so the devices we're using today, it's kind of, like you can come up with your own test data, but it's kind of hard to do. And if you're targeting a real device, well, of course, it's a wonderful test scenario. I would love one. Like I always convince my boss, like my phone applications always also need to run properly in Hawaii. But how do I get there? So give me that flight to Hawaii. I'm going to test there for 14 days. Then maybe Alaska. And, I want to test all over the place. My boss is not that happy with me anymore. But so wouldn't it be great if there would be another way to actually test location-aware stuff? Sensors on the device, especially accelerometer, is a little bit easier. If you have a real device, you can, of course, test that particular functionality. But with the emulator, it's kind of hard. I tried that, and my boss again is asking, like, what are you doing? So I picked up my laptop, and I was just shaking my laptop, thinking, like, hey, that emulator, if it's so great, why doesn't it have sensors on board? Well, it didn't, so my laptop broke, actually, but that's a whole different story, of course. But that's something with Mango, this is going to improve hugely. So the emulator has more functionality. I'm going to show you that functionality, but at the same time, it is still kind of important to test on a real device as well. So you can test a lot on the emulator, but again, that feeling for the application is something you still need to do on a real device. So make sure you always have a device available as well. It's kind of funny though that, like a few of the first applications that were published on Marketplace, not my applications by the way, but there have been people that indeed only tested on the emulator because they just didn't have a device, because device availability was so hard, like last year. Thank goodness we don't have to worry about that anymore because those devices are available. But it just shows actually that Device Emulator is a pretty good tool, I think. The other reason why you want to test on a real device is for performance points of view. Because these days, with like modern hardware on which we develop our applications, the emulator will outrun a device. And it's kind of very, very important to see how the performance is actually on the device. So and this is something which is really, which happened to me actually. So I was updating one of my applications, and it's a little game. It's irrelevant what it's doing, but one of my, like new features was to actually maintain not just a high score, but also an average score. And inside my application, as a little reward, once, like somebody reaches the end goal of the game, I had a little animation as a reward. And I thought like, well, like just before firing off that animation, I'm just going to go quickly to isolated storage. I'm going to store that scoring information in isolated storage, and then I'm going to run the animation. And I just tested that functionality on the emulator. And, like with me typically thinking as an optimist, like how hard can it be to write something to isolated storage? I don't need to test that particular functionality on a device. Then I published it. It came through the test, no problem. And my wife downloaded that application from Marketplace. She's about the only one who's downloading my applications, by the way. That's kind of funny. I'm not sure why that's happening, but it's so true. Anyway, and she told me, like, didn't you update that application recently? I said, yes. And she went, what did you do? Were you watching TV with one eye and coding with another eye or something? Because instead of that smooth behavior that that application had before, right now I'm playing your game, then for at least half a second, nothing seems to happen, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, you start animating something. What turned out to be is that by storing to isolated storage, I was occupying my UI thread, meaning that the animation, it couldn't start until that store action was over. Now, on my development machine, this was such a rapid action that I never ever noticed that there could be an issue with that. Only on a real device. So it's just very, very important to test on real devices. It's also important to test continuously on a device. I would, like really recommend to start testing from day one. And that's then the part where unit testing should have been in here actually. But starting testing from day one is very, very important, not just for correctness of your code, but also for code efficiency. If you find performance issues because you are adding a piece of functionality, it's so much easier to solve those problems while you're still, busy developing that new piece of functionality. If you wait until you have to ship your application, it's going to be harder to solve performance issues. And you also feel more pressure, more stress probably if it's, if you are like me with new projects and with my boss, leaning over my shoulder. It's always like, well, didn't you promise that this application would have been ready, on Friday, and it's Sunday night already, like what's going on here? And then I, sooner willing to forget about the best performance possible. So test always as much as possible and early in development stages as well. You can, of course, also make sure that that your application is running correctly, or if you have, if you have issues inside your application, it's kind of important to also have a full debugger available. So what you can do using Visual Studio is at least, set breakpoints, inspect variables, call out methods directly. And what you cannot do if you're using the Express version of Visual Studio, which I think is extremely annoying actually, but if I'm debugging, I'm probably adding a couple of breakpoints all over my code maybe in different source files, and then at one moment I just want to, execute the whole thing again without being interrupted or without being stopped on breakpoint. So I'm always looking for that menu entry, clear or disable all breakpoints. And it's not there in the Express version. It's only there in the page queues. Very, very annoying. Because the functionality is there, of course. Another thing that you can use Visual Studio for is test tombstoning scenarios, which is very important too. As you know, probably, hopefully, Windows Phone applications, there's only one application running in the foreground at one time, and there's no applications running in the background. So if your application goes to the background, it might be tombstoned. It might be removed from, the operating system, except for a few little things like the backstack is going to be maintained. So when a user goes back, they still, the device knows what page to show, but not state information inside that page. Those scenarios, tombstoning scenarios, can be tested using Visual Studio. Now in Mango, it's going to be even different because there is going to be a new feature called fast application switching, in which your application might not be tombstoned, but might be kept resident in memory. However, if your application is not going to be restarted by the user for a long, long time, it's going to move back on the stack of resident applications, meaning eventually it might be tombstoned again. So in Visual Studio you also have an option for Mango applications to make sure to still test that tombstoning scenario in a proper way. And what you also can do is profile your application. So that's a really nice added feature. It's a very complex feature actually. And what I'm going to show you, in a second or so, is actually profiling in action. this is stuff, it's so brand new that, you know, like interpreting the things that we're seeing, you know, like in an intelligent way is still kind of hard. You need to, you know, like experiment a lot with this stuff to really see consequences of things that are going on during a profiling action. But at least we're going to get a glimpse of it and you know, like hopefully get a feeling of what will go on inside our application. So let's just test the application. I'm going to go back to my desk here, and I'm going to work a little bit on the application, and we're going to test it. So I'm now going to start my application from inside Visual Studio. I'm going to use just the same emulator here. And there's the application. Oh, and I noticed something already, which is kind of scary. I saw my button appear and immediately disappear again. So the where am I, probably the name of the application, has something to do with the button. The button is asking where am I, and it's gone, I guess. So that's pretty bad. Another thing, for the rest though, it looks like, you know, it looks pretty good. For instance, what I maybe can try now, it's kind of scary, but probably I should set a breakpoint here. So to make sure that I'm not going to crash something. So what I'm going to try now is figuring out really where I am. So I'm going to hit this where am I button. And hey, that's cool. So I have this remote debugging session in action here. I'm running on a device. Visual Studio connects to the device. And Visual Studio knows that it has to break when I'm executing this event handler here. So the code I already executed was like, hey, I subscribed to this event, and apparently I have a location, a new location reading. And here it is, 47 minus 122. And of course, everybody knows that this is not Atlanta, right? That's Redmond. That's a Microsoft building, that location. Everybody should know that, right? I mean, that's a number that you should just know by heart there. So if I continue running here, let's see what's happening on my device. Where am I? Well, it's gonna, you know, like figure out where I am. It had a location reading. Now we're calling out to Bing Maps, and if my network connection is fast enough, eventually what you will see is that, hey, indeed, we are in Studio E at Microsoft in Redmond. That's not true, though, so that's not... We are not, right? I mean, we are in Atlanta, right? I have to make sure here. So if I zoom out again, you can see that, hey, well, hopefully you can see that, is that in the center here, we are nicely here in the Seattle area. That's not good. So what I'm going to do is make use of a new feature of Mango, of the device emulator, of the tools that are shipping for Mango. I'm going to show you how I can change my location. Well, I hope I'm going to show you that. So let me just move this a little bit that way. There we go. And what I now could do, for instance, is say like, hey, I noticed this magical 3-letter CNN. And we are pretty close to the CNN Center here. So we are pretty close there because we are in the Georgia World Congress Center, right? I hope. I guess, I assume. So, let's go there. What you saw, by the way, already is a slight movement from my Bing map here. So where am I now? Let's take a look. Hopefully not in Redmond anymore. And we are at the Georgia World Congress Center. Now this, of course, is devastating for my ideas of traveling around the world while testing my location-aware application, but at least I can test them pretty fast. Another cool thing I can do with this functionality is, you know, like Thursday night there's the big TechEd party, and the party is held in the aquarium. So how do I go from this conference center to the aquarium? Well, I happen to know that the aquarium is somewhere there. Let me see, let me maybe zoom out one thing here, so I can zoom in and out completely inside this thing. I have a little bit of a slow connection here, so that's too bad actually. But let's assume that the aquarium is here somewhere. Hopefully I'm right. So immediately you see that, hey, my device is following that new location. What I also can do is now go out of live data, and the next step I can do here is just play my recorded data. and I can say that, hey, I want to have a location update, let's say every 4 seconds or so. I'm going to play back. So I'm start with point 1. And I'm moving on to the next location. And I can, like get entire routes here. So if I want to have some route information, maybe for navigation software or something, I can just, like pre-populate some information there and have a great experience for location-aware applications. And the other thing is that still my button, it's still gone, right? So we need to do something about that. Well, let's see. Would it be there? Let's shake the device real quick. Ah! There it is. So we do have a button. The reason for that is what I told you, what I show you in XAML, is that, hey, I hooked up the accelerometer readings to that button. And now I can test those too. So if I'm moving my device, you can see that my button is nicely following that. So this, of course, I mean, this is a silly example. I mean, I understand that, but think about scenarios where you're developing a game or something. It's great that you now can make use of accelerometer readings here as well. And like with locations, I can record my own movements there, and have like real gaming scenarios that I can test out. Also wonderful for automated testing. I can just, like play different scenarios over and over again. So that's really added value, I think, to applications. And let's just see if that's functional. Well, it seems that that's working as well. So that button indeed did what I asked it to do, changing the appearance of that map there. So everything looks like we are good here. So we tested the application as well. It's completely functional. Now, the next step should have been to actually test this same application on a device. But I think we are kind of good to go. We are kind of ready to ship this. And I think I have a good feeling about this application. Everybody, just a second, everybody who wants to go to Atlanta and needs to be in the conference center and afterwards need to walk to the aquarium will benefit from this application. So probably, well, let's say $100 is not too much to ask for this application, right? I mean, that's pretty good. There was a question. Let's just. Yeah, so the question is the information on the right-hand side that I'm showing here, is that the X, Y, and Z position? It actually is, yeah. On the right-hand side of the actual emulator itself, does he have like text on the right side? No, this information here. Is that what you're talking about? Okay, no, let me explain that then real quick. The information you're seeing there is, let me zoom in a little bit here, if I can. I hope I could. Ah, there we go. These are performance counters. What this indicates is the first one is the number of frames per second that are drawn by the graphic processing unit. The second one is the number of frames that can be drawn by the UI thread, the activity of the UI thread, so by the CPU, then the amount of memory in use, and a number of other counters there. So you see them in rest right now. If I'm going to do something to this application, so if, for instance, I'm going to click that button, you will see that those counters are going to change, meaning in this situation that, hey, to change, I needed to redraw my map. There's a lot of information that need to be provided there. Probably not enough was cached, and I'm not using the graphics processor in the best possible way here. So those are indicators of that. Now, one of the things there, I'm gonna come back to that later because it's kind of important. Those counters are very helpful, but sometimes they're not helpful, and sometimes they're really in your way, and that's something I need to talk about too. But I'm gonna talk about that in relation to publishing our application. Because that's the next step we're going to do right now. So we tested the application seems to be good, and so far I didn't have to worry about anything, but now it's time to actually submit this application. I was using, by the way, the emulator, so I didn't have to worry about running on a phone, which is another thing that I might need to worry about. And that's the part where we're going to talk about how to submit your application to Marketplace. Now, I'm not going to talk about the internals of Marketplace or give a lot of detail about Marketplace, because there is another session later today that is covering Marketplace in detail. But I just want to, like from a developer's experience, at least discuss why it's important and why we have this, like kind of relationship with Marketplace. So if you're just developing applications that you know of, Windows Phone applications, that they're only going to run on the emulator, then you don't have to worry about Marketplace. But they're not that useful, I can tell you that. I did that for a year, just only targeting my own emulator, but it was not the way to become rich and famous, so I needed a device or something. When I had my first device though, I, like connected it through USB, and I was trying to deploy from Visual Studio to that device. Well, that was not a success story either. It continuously told me that I couldn't connect. So then I, like asked for some help on some forums, and it turned out that, hey, what I needed to do was register myself as Windows Phone developer on Marketplace. And that step is a step that's going to take some time. So for that step, you're going to pay an annual fee of $99, I believe it is. And once you are registered, so you're leaving, like your, what's going to do is your identity is going to be verified. So there's some organization, well, in the end Microsoft, but they need to know that you are who you are, especially since you can make money with, like applications later on. Once your identity has been checked, you have the right to unlock, or the possibility to unlock, one or more regular phones. And that unlocking means that I can then immediately from inside Visual Studio deploy applications to the phone. So that's a great way of testing my applications. But the only possible way to do that is once you have to register as a Windows Phone developer on Marketplace. And you can then unlock up to 3 devices. The other thing you can do then afterwards is submit applications for verification and eventually for, placing them on Marketplace. So it's very important that you're going to register as a Windows Phone developer if you are, if you need to publish your applications. It's the only way that your applications can be published. And for end users, the only way they can get your application on their device is also by going to Marketplace. And this is an area which is kind of interesting because now, we spent the majority of time during this session on creating, one of the best applications I've ever seen so far. A location-aware application that shows us the aquarium in Atlanta. Fantastic. And now it comes to that last step. I'm going to submit that application. And what I need to come up with is an application description. Now, if I would just say like, hey, this application shows the aquarium in Atlanta on a Bing Maps map. Sounds kind of boring. So I need to think about a great description. Shouldn't be too long, but it should be appealing to people. Should start by, this is the best application you've ever seen, and actually it's the only application you will ever need on Windows Phone. That's a description, like I would be curious if somebody would write that, and I would probably, install that application. First, probably in trial mode, test the application, but then indeed being blown away, like, whoa, the aquarium in Atlanta. I want to have that application, and that developer, being me there, is going to start getting rich, right? So think about a compelling application description, but also think about some artwork. What you need to do is add screen dumps to your to that submission, so people who are browsing through Marketplace can at least see what your application is looking like. And now I need to come back to this part here. What's going to happen, or what has happened in the past with many applications, and I just don't want to see that anymore, so we need to talk about that, is that people made screen dumps, developers made screen dumps, and you can look on Marketplace today and you will find them, where you saw silly counters here. Well, what does that mean? That somebody took a screen dump, but those counters only appear if you're running your application in debug mode. In release mode, it doesn't. Now, you have to submit your application being in release mode, but people just took those pictures too early. That's one thing that, should not be necessary. If you still, at an early stage want to make sure to have proper screen dumps and don't want to have those counters there, well, there's a possibility for you to do that. So let me stop debugging here. Let's just go to the application source file. And what you will see here is actually, if the debugger is attached, we're going to enable frame rate counter. So I'm just going to set this property to true. Well, if I just comment this out, and I'll run my application again, what you'll see now is that, hey, those counters are gone. So this is the way to make those screenshots, actually. Very, very important. It's a little step. It's nothing, but it's kind of hurting me that I see, you know, like applications being published on Marketplace with screen dumps where I see those counters, because they distract, you know, like, and it's just not necessary. So that's kind of important there to realize and to know. So, compelling artwork. It's not just screen dumps, it's also, you can also have a larger image that you can use and which will show up actually in Zune on Marketplace. So probably we're going to take a look at that later on during the session. What you also need to think about is that your artwork resolution has to be the right one. So it's specified. There is a whole list of specifications like, hey, if you want to submit a Windows Phone application, the application, of course, should not throw exceptions that are not caught and things like that. So the application should run properly. The application should behave properly. The application should deal with, you know, like things like occasionally connected scenarios or stuff like that. But also the application should not be too large. Also, the resolution of those screen dumps should be exactly the same as Microsoft describes or requires in that document that's available for you to learn what you need to do for submitting applications. You have to make sure that the back button behaves properly, because end users expect with the back button to go back a page, maybe eventually leaving your application with that. So those are things that you have to think about, and those are, you know, like just a few items that are easily solvable. And if you reach one of those, or if you are not, you know, like committing to the requirements that Microsoft set up for application submission, you're just losing time because your application will not be certified. Your application certification will fail. You get a proper report back why it's failing, but it's just a couple of days that you just wasted, which is really too bad, actually. So those are simple things to solve. So let's submit that application. Let me go back to my machine here, and your first one-stop shop should be create.msdn.com. So from here, I can log on to this portal. I just logged on with my own live data, and what I now can do is either submit a new application or take a look at how my applications are doing. So I'm going to take a look at my Windows Phone applications. And these are the applications I published so far. It's nothing serious. I mean, I'm not, you know, like I like to talk about developing Windows Phone applications, but I don't have, well, until today, I didn't have that killer idea for an application. But, well, this next one is going to be it, so that's kind of cool. But what I also can see here is, you know, like reports on how my applications are doing. So this is live data, actually. And again, I'm not going to get rid of those applications because nobody's downloading it. My wife is actually from Germany. This is a German language application. So I just found out that she downloaded it 39 times. That's pretty cool. Don't know why, but actually she is paying my salary, it turns out. I never thought about it that way, but no, that's interesting. Anyway, let's go back to my dashboard here, because what we're going to do is submit a new application. So that application, we just developed that. So the first step we need to do is upload the application. So we need to come up with a name for that application. Where am I? It's going to be a Windows Phone 7 application. The other choices you have is Windows Mobile 6.5 and Windows Mobile 6.0. But we're going to do a Windows Phone 7 application. It's going to be version 1 of my application. And then I'm just going to click here on this plus sign. And you see an Explorer window opening. And what I need to do now is go look for the ZAP file that was created. And let's see if I can find that. It should be under my TechEd folder here. This is this session. It is Showtime, definitely, because I feel the pressure of that. So let's go to my binary folder. I didn't make a release version, well, let's fool the system, let's submit a debug version. Never do this because your application will fail, your submission will fail. But for now, I'm just going to go for that. I'm going to open this. And what you can see is that the size of my application has been determined already. What I now can do is leave some developer nodes. And this is just private information for myself. And what I could say here is like, I might need to test outside Atlanta. I don't know what. I can also add some tester nodes, and these nodes will actually appear at a tester at Microsoft who's verifying my application. So I could say here, no need to test this app, it is simply perfect. I'm best friends with those guys there, like testing my stuff. Does it requires technical exception? No, probably not, so I'm done. Everything is fine. Now what's going to happen is my ZAP file is uploaded to the portal where it can be tested by test engineers from Microsoft. What you will see, however, is that, and that's good because I didn't want to have that application being submitted anyway. But I get an error right now. The error tells me that my manifest file is not valid. Well, the reason for that is that, hey, Mango is not released. So in what I told you before is I can migrate existing applications from Windows Phone to Mango, and the only thing that's going to change is something in your manifest. Well, that something is the version number. So we are checking against the version number, and actually the error message here is not like, well, it is not valid, and it's a good description actually. Almost. If you created this application with an earlier version of Windows Phone Developer Tools, try recreating it with the latest tools. But it is exactly the other way around right now, because I used the latest tools, and the tools are too new for Marketplace today. So once Mango is released, and probably like sometime before that to have like Mango applications available for end users, then you can submit those applications. Today you can't. Today it has to be a Windows Phone application, not a Mango application. So that's something important there. The other thing is once you have submitted your application and once that application appears on Marketplace, well then the next thing of course is you can take a look where that application is appearing. And it's just appearing, for instance, on Zune or on your device. You can browse through Marketplace. I'm specifically using Zune right now to show one more thing. So I'm just going to go to my own stuff here. Let's say, let's take this one, for instance. So here's my application on Marketplace. There's a description of the application. It's always nice to have, like maybe some changes in new versions and stuff like that. A trial mode is very, it's great to have because people just download more of your applications. Here's all that artwork, all those screen shots that I have available. And then here you see something else. And again, you can see that I'm not the best artist in the world as far as creating graphics or something. But this is a larger image that will be used as a background for my application. Now that part is optional, but it is kind of cool to have that available. So think about compelling artwork for your applications. Your applications will simply sell better because of that. So that's another thing. What I also need to tell you is, well, how do I make those screenshots? Because funny enough, almost nobody talks about that during presentations, and it's kind of, like it's very simple, but it's also a very important step that you need to do well. So the first thing I need to do is have a tool available in order to create those screenshots. And what I can do is just take the snippet tool that is part of Windows 7. I'm going to take a Windows snip. First mistake that people are making is that this would be their screenshot. And in the requirements it is listed like, hey, you should not show any of the emulator surroundings. You just should show your own screen. So instead of doing this, what I need to do is take this as a screenshot. Now, if I would have done this in this situation, it is again, I mean, this is better, but it's still wrong. My screenshots will still not be accepted by Microsoft for validation. The reason for that is that in this current setup, what I did was fit the emulator to the screen. But what I need to do is have a resolution of my pictures, of my screenshots of 800 by 480. So instead of fitting to screen, I need to zoom out to 100%. It doesn't really matter that I don't see this thing completely, but now if I'm taking this screenshot again, now I have the proper resolution, the proper size, and I don't have that surrounding emulator image. So this will be accepted. And again, it's not difficult, it's very easy to do. But it's such a shame if you wouldn't do that, because you're just losing a couple of days while submitting your applications. The other thing, do I need to tell more about it? No, actually not. I mean, I'm not going to explain for the rest how the snip tool works. So let's just go back to the slide deck. So we have submitted our application, and now it's a matter of this movement, sitting on a chair and doing nothing, because that money will drop in automatically. Oh, during that process, I can select what price I'm going to ask for that application. So with that, we are, kind of at the end of my presentation on development tools. We still have 6 minutes left. I thought first of hey, that means we have a lot of time for Q&A. But it turns out that my slide deck has been modified slightly. And there's a ton of slides added about everything that's going on at TechEd. So probably we need another 45 minutes for me to talk through those particular slides. I might do that a little faster. But at least, and those are the important things to take away from this session, is that, hey, you saw in the tools we are using Visual Studio 2010, the latest release of Visual Studio. We are using Expression Blend 4, the latest release of Expression Blend. In other words, we are first-class citizens. We are making use of the latest tools, development and design tools that Microsoft ships, which is very, very cool. There was an era when we were, developing Windows mobile applications where that was not the case, where we were always running at least one version behind of Visual Studio. So that's something that is, it's good to know. It's also good to know that all tools integrate seamlessly. So I can start in Blend, I can move over to Visual Studio or the other way around. Sometimes I need to save my work in order for the other tool to understand that some modifications were made, but that's the only thing. Thanks to those tools, we can be very, very productive. I mean, if you want to develop a Windows Phone application, you have the proof right now. If your boss is asking you, how long is it going to take to develop a Windows Phone application? Simple answer, 75 minutes. Oh, and by the way, this is streamed, so you can look it back. So that's it. So it's very, very fast. Very important, though. This is really important. I mean, I'm making a few jokes here, which, are kind of lame. But what is very important is don't wait for Mango, but start developing today. Because each application you're developing today will be easily transferred to Mango, but it's not even necessary because it will run on Mango, because there's backwards compatibility. So your applications developed today will run tomorrow. So start developing today. And start immediately after, this session. Well, no, don't. Go to other sessions as well, but start immediately after TechEd. Because, you can start making that money sooner rather than later. Other important thing, I'm coming soon back to you. Other important thing here is that don't forget that URL, create.msdn.com. Register as a developer in order to unlock phones and in order to be able to submit your applications. And very, very important, and hopefully, I mean, if that's the only thing that you got away from this session, I'm happy, completely happy already. But developing for Windows Phone, it's a lot of fun. I mean, I'm, continuously thinking that it's so cool to develop for Windows Phone. So hopefully you get that same feeling if you're not developing for Windows Phone yet. If you are, I'm sure that you're gonna, agree with me. There was a question there. Yes, so the question is, how does the phone work together with the cloud as a storage device? Well, you have perfect integration. For instance, if you make use of Windows Azure as a cloud solution, what has been released, I think today or yesterday or something, is a toolkit for Windows Phone to easily, with like one or two statements, to actually set up your cloud-based server and create some web services that you can use to go back and forth from device to the cloud in an efficient way. So yes, you can do that easily. Can you attach to a SkyDrive? For pictures you can, but just for pictures right now. Okay, let's just walk quickly through those remaining slides here. There's a lot of content. Unfortunately, the Monday content is already, you know, like past. So it's still available for streaming. I already saw a couple of these sessions appearing on Channel 9, so they're all available for all of us. Today there's a number of other sessions still in the afternoon. One of the sessions is around phone applications together with Azure. So to answer your question, there's a great session around it. There should be a marketplace session as well today somewhere. Yeah, understanding Windows Phone Marketplace, which is a session at 5 o'clock. Tomorrow we have more sessions. If you want to, you know, like be really interactive in a session and share your ideas about phone development, I'm doing an interactive session tomorrow, sort of a discussion about Windows Phone development. On Thursday, we have an in-depth session on how to use, for instance, the profiler, but not just the profiler, which I didn't really show you right now, because I'm going to do a session on that on Thursday, specifically on Windows Phone performance and on profiling your applications. So you can have a look at the profiler at that time. And now I think it's time for winning a Windows Phone. So if you're going to go, you know, like if you have other questions, make sure you're going to go to the booth and ask those questions there. I'm going to make sure to be there as well to answer as much of your questions as possible. And now I have a question for you. And the question is, it's a simple question because my mood is very good, so react fast. What, do I need a version number? Yes, I do need a version number. What tool do you use to design Windows Phone applications? There, straight. Yeah, version number. Yeah, this is no, okay. Expression blend, I give that away. So if you can come up to me later, each and every Windows Phone session that starts with WPH, you can have the chance to win a Windows Phone. So go to other sessions. With that, thank you very, very much for your attention, and hopefully you have a great TechEd for the remainder. Yeah.
I had one very simple question.
Sure.
When you unlock a phone to an account, is that unlocked phone able to be used with multiple accounts?
Yes.
So, for example, if you're a developer and I'm a developer, and I've unlocked it with my account, can you put more applications on yours?
Absolutely.